Gentrification, the act of wealthy individuals purchasing cheap real estate in low-income communities, has plagued lower-class individuals since the 1970s. This practice displaces families that rely on affordable housing as their sole option to house themselves and their children. This often replaces the cultures and lives that originally resided in these communities, leaving them unrecognizable. Our city, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, is certainly subject to gentrification. One example of this is shown through the expansion of universities such as the University of Pennsylvania and Temple University. Universities often need to invest in older property or businesses around the area in order to build new facilities for their students and faculty. While such an idea may be inevitable considering the rise of corporate expansion and the growing interest in building real estate wealth, the federal government has taken strides to combat or slow gentrification in large cities. One measure has been the Community Reinvestment Act, an act that forces corporations to state the benefits to a community and culture when purchasing property in order to expand. This was seen as an improvement to the previous system, but fails at inclusion due to the fact that people in the community are still unable to purchase and/or keep this real property. Current Yale student and former resident of Philadelphia, Victor Seamus Kagan, compares the act of gentrification and redlining.
Around 1920s, 1930s, a lot of government programs came into effect that were trying to help people become homeowners. Passed a bill that created the FHA, which ensured basically that there would be housing loans that exist for people so they can ensure that they can support themselves. The issue is, of course, they were based off of the HOLC, which is a Home Ownership Loan Corporation, which actually used biases. Essentially, this designate which neighborhoods are allowed to have these loans, and essentially created what is redlining, which determined what neighborhoods are quote unquote good. But really, it based off of that, and essentially all of that snowballed because of racist practices. So, based on different ethnic backgrounds and cultural backgrounds, as well as religious, communities are designated as not livable, places that don't deserve loans because these people will not be able to sustain them. And this really impacted communities that had in Philadelphia especially, African American residents. If you were not considered white by the HOLC, the people that were doing those surveys literally would designate you as somebody not capable of handling a loan and not capable of returning it based on racial prejudices and religious discrimination. And that snowballs into today, basically. So all these communities that were redlined have become poorer and poorer. Not really many communities have been able to become more prosperous. And as these communities become even more poor, folks are not able to sustain themselves. And as houses go for sale, landlords actually end up buying out a lot of these properties and letting them become awful conditions. So they won't take care of utilities, they won't take care of properties, and they'll literally make it so that people cannot live in them.
Gentrification doesn't only affect Philadelphians. Larger cities like San Francisco have also felt the effects of gentrification. Median rental housing prices in gentrifying neighborhoods in San Francisco have increased 40% since 1990. This is causing lower-wage workers to move farther and farther away from the city and their workplaces, which makes their commute not only a lot more financially draining, but also significantly more time-consuming. This doesn't leave many options for the people who have been displaced. The United States has a shortage of housing for low-income households, and government officials have put in little effort to impose strict rent control and provide affordable rent housing. Large-scale public housing was abandoned by city governments in the 1990s, causing conditions to worsen over time and make these neighborhoods close to unlivable. An incident that occurred in Philadelphia in so-called affordable housing caused 12 deaths, an apartment fire that could have been prevented just by upkeeping the fire alarms in the building. New legislation has been proposed by member representatives of New York, Adriano Espaillat.
Homelessness is now at epidemic levels across our country, particularly in our urban cities. Families are homeless. Children and women and seniors and veterans are homeless. When we speak of the Build Back Better program,
Gentrification is often argued to be inevitable as populations in cities grow and there becomes a lack of housing. Because of the tremendous growth of cities, traffic congestion arises, leading people to move farther out, usually to poor communities where there are less people. Those neighborhoods become more popular and the new people moving in start rebuilding to accommodate more people with newer, nicer housing, causing the value of the property in the area to go up, which also in turn causes people who had already lived in those communities to move out. Though gentrification is usually considered negative, it can often lead to commercial development, improved economic opportunity, lower crime rates, cleaner areas, and an increase in property values, which benefits existing homeowners. Redlining and gentrification are results of different federal policies and acts that have been passed over decades. The results are seen throughout not only our city, but also in others throughout the nation. It is important to understand both sides of the situation in order to come to a clear decision about the effects of gentrification on our society today.